Everyone, I want to welcome Daniel J. Lewis to Podcast Insider Special Edition. I've known Daniel, my God, what year did you start podcasting, Daniel?
I started in '07, and I think it was just after that I met you at a PodCamp, Ohio. I was there when God sent a bolt of lightning when you spoke badly against Google.
There was a crack of lightning, wasn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, anyway, that's funny, but Daniel's been in the podcasting space, obviously, a very, very long time, just like I have. But Daniel, for the audience that doesn't know you, I will let you introduce yourself. But I will say that Daniel was introduced into the Podcast Hall of Fame a year ago, so he's got some chops here. So give everyone just a quick introduction to your background.
Yeah, I'm Daniel J. Lewis. I love helping podcasters because the podcasting industry has been so impactful for me as a listener. And then to be able to help others is so fun and encouraging and exciting. So I host the Audacity podcast. I co-host the Future of Podcasting Podcasters Roundtable. I make products and services for podcasters like Podgagement, formerly known as My Podcast Reviews. And I just love my tagline that I use and now is I educate, advocate, and innovate for podcasters and the podcasting industry.
You know, there's a long history in podcasting and audio, and obviously with your Audacity to podcast, you've been helping podcasters for many, many years. But I think, we've gotten to the point now where audio and the power of audio is trying to be downplayed a little bit about, with the insurgence of video. But I think I want to go back and today to talk about the evolution of audio production and audio in podcasting and, go back to your early days and think about, hitting the record button for the first time and what the goal was when you started your show.
Well, for me, I just wanted to make people laugh because my first podcast was a clean comedy podcast. At that time, I was listening to podcasts like Leo Laporte's This Week in Tech and Grammar Girl, and this little podcast called You Suck at Web Design, which is no longer available on the internet, but it demonstrated for me a model of what I was kind of looking for as a way to tell stories and make people laugh with my stories as I was a bachelor back then. I am again now. But certain things that this today we would call adulting, that kind of thing is the stuff I experienced. And I just wanted to make people laugh. I just wanted to share funny stories. And along the way, though, because of my background in production and public speaking and design and such, I started to notice aspects of podcasting in the podcasting industry and things that weren't being taught or I thought weren't being taught thoroughly or certain aspects weren't being taught or certain techniques weren't being brought forth and perspectives. So at some point when I started the Audacity to Podcast, which is a podcast about podcasting, it was because I felt like I just had something else to say, just another perspective to share, even though back then I felt like the industry was already saturated with the two other podcasts about podcasting I knew of at that point. And yet I felt like there's some space for my voice as well. And I want to inspire other podcasters to do better.
I think back to, the ability, and this it's going to sound kind of crazy for the audience, but it was pretty novel in those early days to do an audio show. We weren't thinking about video yet, and to be able to have control and be able to say what we want to say without some licensing deal. And, those that are in just getting started in podcasting today, obviously, that is all kind of assumed. You've got all these different platforms to be able to put your voice or your face or whatever you want on. But in the early days, it was really about that freedom of distribution and being able to have a choice on where your voice was heard, where your brand was represented, and all those things. And I think today we kind of forget about the what's really special here in being able to publish a podcast and really kind of be in control from day one. We're not the latest shiny object, but the testament of audio continues to push through with probably about 95% of podcasts today that are audio only, excluding those that are on YouTube and, have a microphone like we're doing right here and doing a video.
Yeah, and the thing that attracted me first to podcasts, besides the fact that it was a coworker who was raving saying, "Oh, you got to check out podcasts. They're now coming in iTunes 4.9." So that's when I started listening to podcasts because they came to iTunes. Thanks, Steve Jobs and Adam Curry, for that. And what attracted me so much to them, though, was that I could find podcasts about exactly and only the subjects I was interested in.
Yeah.
I had a long commute at that time, so I was burned out listening to local talk radio, which fit into the same basic categories as any local talk radio. And I'd burn through all my music. I'd listen to every audiobook I was interested in. But podcast presented this whole new frontier of information that was exactly and only the information that I wanted. If I wanted a podcast about only technology, I could find that. If I wanted a podcast about only grammar, I could find that. These kinds of things that you couldn't find on radio. And for us as podcasters, then we still have that opportunity to talk about what we want to talk about and find an audience who's interested in that same thing. And that could be political persuasions, that could be entertainment options, that could be personal pursuits, professional interests, anything like that, that we can, I love saying this because it is so literally true, that we can change the world from our closets, because that's where the best acoustics are, or our basements. And so many of us are, and that's the power of podcasting. I think especially the power of our voice in podcasting more than our face.
I think, if I go back and think here for a second, when I wrote my book, there was one phrase in there, something I wanted in those early days. Obviously, I want to be able to fill my brain with what I want to fill my brain with, which you're alluding to, pick the topics of content, and being able to take it on and go. And, in those early days, that there was no iPhone yet. There was, iPods and some mini recorders, and it wasn't as easy as it is today. But what I find truly remarkable today is that, as an example, in my library of shows that I have that I listen to, if I'm in the mood for tech, I listen to tech. If I'm in the mood for politics, I listen to politics. If I'm in the mood for listening about AI or whatever, I can listen to AI. I have this on-demand choice, and I'm not tied to this linear feed of audio coming out of a radio station or a Sirius XM or whatever it may be. Now they have their time and their place of when you want to just turn on FM 100 and listen to rock and roll or whatever you want to listen to. There's a time and place for that for all of us, and probably it's one of the reasons why radio, even though it's declining, I don't think my kids have listened to a radio station, in their entire life, but there's a time and a place for radio. But for me, the ability of, even here in the house, there's times when obviously I have the TV on and maybe I have a YouTube channel up, but there's times when I want to, maybe clean the house, do a chore or whatever it is, and the video portion is not at all fit, because I would stop and look and I wouldn't get things done, where I can tune in either through a smart device or through my phone, or the multitude of ways we can consume this content today. And I can say, hey, let's play the marketing AI podcast, or let's listen to X, Y, and Z. And that on-demand piece is often now, I think, very much overlooked. People are not commuting as much. But there's a new report out that says now that commutes have started to come back, guess what? People are now tuning in on their commutes, like you did, to listen to podcasts because they can't watch. So what do you say to those that say you have to have video?
I think video can be very engaging. And the neat thing about making a podcast is that you have the option to do the exact same content in audio or video, and both, if you're good at making sure that you're not alienating one audience or the other.
Right.
But I really don't think you have to have audio. The whole thing about, the number one podcast platform is YouTube. Well, it's, I know I'm going to step on some toes here.
It's
I know
okay.
you're not afraid of doing that, Todd. I think it was an inappropriately asked question on surveys that people have been led to believe that what they're seeing on YouTube is a podcast. Therefore, they think that they're consuming podcasts the most on YouTube. And part of that is also because people on YouTube are calling their stuff podcasts, maybe
Yeah.
because they're traditional podcasters now also putting stuff on YouTube, and they keep referring to themselves as a podcast instead of a show, when podcast is really a label for a distribution method. But that starts to get into all these kind of messy things.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if online video on YouTube is a podcast, then what differentiates that from something on Netflix or Amazon Prime? Is Netflix the number one podcast platform since everyone goes there to watch a video podcast? Well, if you say, no, it's because it's dramatized and high production values. Well, there are dramatized high production values on YouTube and in audio podcasts.
Yeah.
So you can't distinguish it based on the type of content. You have to distinguish it based on the distribution method. And for that sake, I think it's good for podcasters to do video if they can, because there are certainly fun things that you can do on video that you can't do in audio.
Absolutely.
And certainly some people love to just watch you speak, especially if you're an attractive person, then people would for sure enjoy watching you speak and just seeing your mannerisms and such. But I really do not like this pressure that I see podcasters getting, that's making them feel stressed like they have to do video in order to be successful. And I completely disagree with that.
I have this unique perspective because I actually started video streaming specifically. I think it was 2006, 7. I've been doing it about 15 years. So whatever, let's back up 15 years. So let's
way back on like Ustream and Livestream,
it was,
and all that.
and there was no YouTube yet. Or YouTube is just in its infancy. So I guess I missed getting on the train there. But the reason I did video was for a little more interaction with the live audience. That was my original reason to do video, and to experiment and see what happened. And what I learned over the years is that 70% of my audience listens, 30% watches. Why? Don't know. But what's surprisingly is the 30% doesn't watch on YouTube. They've been trained to either come to the website, or they have been on Apple Podcasts and watch the video on Apple Podcasts, which most people don't even know is possible. So they get the video somehow. Either it's on basically the podcast app, on the Apple TV, and just a variety of ways they get the content. So for me, it was kind of this thing like, okay, some people like to listen, some people like to watch. Long as they listen or watch, I don't care where they get it.
Right.
And we have to admit, though, it's there. I was watching I wasn't even familiar with the individual before he interviewed now President Trump in his studio, and forgive me, I always forget the letters of the network, but it's the guy that's a real estate mogul who has his studio's in a bank safe. Anyway, long story short, I thought, oh, that's a cool backdrop, all the old safety deposit boxes and stuff, and I thought, oh, it looks to me like a good interview show. It's 3-4 guys back and forth. They'll have a guest, but then I saw a back video of their production room. My production room is right here in front of me, and I have to I have to touch everything. They had like 30 people in a CNN, Fox News-esque type of studio, and I'm like, this is not a podcast. This is a high-end production with a production team. No wonder they're doing 1 million views on YouTube. Now, again, they have an audio podcast as well, which is cool. They also, so we've all seen those shows, but often we don't know what level of support money is behind those productions. I'm a producer, editor, marketer, social media hack of one for my personal shows. And you too, unless we be able to afford a VA to help us with some stuff, usually the podcasters that are creating content are kind of, now they may not have a nice studio like I have now. Again, I've also been doing this for 15 years. So I've had some collectibles, got some soundproofing panels, and if I had to do all over again, I probably would not do it this way. But video is a great add-on, but you made a point earlier, as long as you know how to do both. I have a note right here on my monitor. It's a little yellow stickum note, goes over the top where the it's a Mac where the time and some of the some of the stuff is. It's covering up the thing for the computer, and it says, "Remember, they're listening." Because I get focused on the video, and I'll flip something into the screen, and I'll be talking about it, and the audio audience goes,
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? We can't see it. So I think there's this opportunity to be able to do both, as long as you're making sure you're being descriptive what you're talking about that you're showing on a screen.
What I tell podcasters is try to think of every time you use the word this, define that.
Right.
And that is even inside of an audio podcast. If it's audio only, there are times to define that too, because
True.
You might hear someone say, hey, we're going to talk about this particular product. They name the product. And then for the rest of the conversation, they never name the product again. They just keep saying this thing, this movie, this book, this software, whatever it is.
Now, if I'm holding something in my hand here, it's empty right now. But if I did take a drink of this and said, oh, that was really good, I should have said, well, I just had a drink of the Amber Edition Red Bull, and then people know what I'm drinking. So you're right, is to be able to have the balance to be able to let the audience know what's going on. So, I think there's this, and maybe let me know what you think here. Do you feel then, based upon everything that you're hearing from people that you talk to, that there's this, if you don't do video, I'm being left behind mentality?
I see that creeping in for sure. I think most of the people who already listen to me, and I've already spoken with, I think they have a good sense of it. Many of them want to expand into video because they do see the opportunity. And there is plenty of more opportunity with video.
Sure.
You can be in more places with video than you can be with audio only, and be better in those places as well. But I think it's a lot of the newer podcasters that are coming in and hearing they must do video, or maybe they're even hearing that video is the only thing they should do, because they're hearing this stuff about, YouTube, video, and they're not even thinking at all about doing audio. I see that a whole lot.
I had a discussion with someone a couple of days ago, and it was largely by text. And the what do you do? I work in the podcasting space, and do you do a podcast? Yes, I do 2 or 3. And where can I find it on YouTube? I'm like, well, I said, the easiest way to find it is on a podcast app. I said, if you have an iPhone, just load the Apple Podcast app up, or if you're on, and then, well, that person said, well, I only have an Android. So because Google Podcasts is no longer involved in podcasting, we're back to the situation where Android users, their podcasting app is YouTube. So they did a real sly ploy there by getting rid of Google Podcasts and not having a dedicated podcast app, because now they really kind of force people's hand that are on Androids without them having to go look in the app store for a podcast app. People say, just go look on YouTube. So it was brilliant in shutting down Google Podcast in that regard. But here it made it very, very difficult for me, for someone that I was trying to guide to a podcast app, because they were on Android. It made it very, very difficult. So I did say, hey, by the way, Apple Podcasts has a PWA, and gave the instructions. But then that's just too many steps, right?
Right.
And or you recommend a new podcasting app, and in the end, just to make it easy, I said, well, just go to my website, and I said you'll be able to view my audio and video podcast if you want and listen to. So it kind of made me realize here, okay, we once again, I hate to say it, Daniel, we're back in education mode for Android users.
I'm not sure we ever left education mode. I mean, even with, the YouTube thing, I agree that was like really smart move on their part.
Yeah.
And there is so much potential to bringing podcasts to YouTube, so much good potential.
Yep.
And they threw it all away.
Yeah,
I feel like the way that Google implemented podcasts into YouTube is one of the worst things ever.
It's a hack.
It is the laziest approach ever.
Yep.
They had the opportunity, and they still have it. They could make an experience that is built around consuming audio on YouTube, and that would be fantastic. And for any environmentalist too, it would conserve resources too, because think of all the resources, processing power, bandwidth, and such that are being wasted by delivering audio through what I call a fake video, which is just, a static image.
Static image.
It's just video for the sake of being a thing that is on YouTube. They could save all that.
And I've yet to find a successful show that's doing it that way. And even those, and here's the other part too. I ask people that are doing video that have engaged, what's doing better? Is the audio show doing better? Is the video show doing better? And it's about 80-20. About 80% the audio show is doing better, and about 20% the video show is doing better. But the difference is they started. They didn't add on. Those that have been doing audio for all this time are doing much better in audio than so it's definitely a paradigm shift. But I don't think a lot of folks, including myself, I really don't have a face for video. I may not even have a voice for audio, but
I wasn't going to say it.
But so far it seems to have worked. Let's switch modes a little bit and think about the tech. The tech used to be so hard, but now, you get a microphone now that's got incredible sound that just plugs in your computer for under $100. That didn't exist before. So are you, in your talking with podcasters, are you making mic recommendations these days?
Oh, yeah. And about that technology aspect, that's so much why the podcasting early days were dominated by majority men and majority geeky subjects, because it was a geeky field, and that tends to just stereotypically attract more men. But in 2015, I did a keynote at a podcasting conference, and one of my predictions on the future of podcasting was the technology will disappear. And we see that happening now as we've got equipment that is designed for podcasters that do all of these things. Like, do we even have to talk about mix minus anymore?
It's not a conversation. Oh, my God. Yeah,
to try and
talk about a deer in the headlights topic. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Just trying to explain that term alone. And now we don't even have to think about it, because we've got all of this great gear that you just plug and play, literally. And it's so great. So when it comes down to equipment, what I find myself recommending the most, I will clarify, I don't think it's the best microphone, but it is the best starting microphone, and many podcasters grow with it for many years, is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X USB. It's even better than the Q2U, which is by Samsung, and it's a little bit cheaper now too. But there are so many little things I find that make that microphone better than some of those other USB XLR microphones. But what I love just about that basic design of being both USB and XLR is, you could go to like a Best Buy, if they still exist by the time that someone's listening to this episode. You could go to one of these stores and pick up probably a Blue Yeti or a Blue Snowball. That's a USB only microphone.
Yeah.
And what happens when you do that is you are tying yourself to that technology, and you cannot expand upon it. Like, trying to combine more than one USB microphone on the same computer is very complicated, or in some cases outright impossible, unless you get the manufacturer involved, which is crazy. And you can't expand into professional equipment either if you want to someday have a mixer or do portable recordings or anything like that. But if you get a microphone like the ATR 2100X USB that is both USB and XLR, well, the USB aspect lets you plug it directly into your computer or a mobile device. You can, yes, plug it
Yep.
into an Android device or an iOS device and connect digitally that way. But it also has XLR, which is that professional audio connection standard. So you could plug it into a Rodecaster Pro or a Tascam recorder or a Zoom PodTrack P4, something like that, or plug it into. We've got all of these new devices that are getting smaller and smaller that you could even just plug just right into the back of the microphone and record directly onto that device, or turn it into a wireless microphone to take with you to certain conferences and such. And yeah, it might not be designed exactly for some of these things, but the nice thing is that with one microphone, you do have a lot of flexibility if you can use it right in these situations. And the audio quality, I think, is good enough to grow with for many years. There are some very popular podcasts out there who have made tens, thousands, maybe even at this point, $1 million or more in sponsorship income that are still, last time I checked, are still using the Audio-Technica 2100 microphone.
If I had to rebuild this studio, that mic wouldn't be sitting here. I'm
Right.
pointing to my SMB7 because there's just so many options now. But you're right. That ATR mic is, and I travel with one. It's in my bag everywhere I go, because you never know when an opportunity can present itself to be able to do a recording. And it's, it works with any computer, and that's the beauty of it. Just may need a little recording software, but that's already covered. I think that it used to be you just record wherever you are, and people. And I used to say this on video too. People will forget your bad video, but they won't forgive you for bad audio. And I think today we're past all of that. I think if you're going to do video, you're going to do audio, you have to have, good quality sound. What advice are you giving to people on recording environment these days?
The most important thing, really, more important than the gear you use, is your technique and your environment. So while even if you're doing video, your audio always matters most because people need to be able to hear and understand you. So while the microphone does determine some of that quality that you get, as we just said, you could get really good quality with a $50 or so microphone.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you use it that matters most. Like we could get a $1,000 studio microphone and put it 2 feet away while we're recording in a room with hard, flat floors, nothing on the walls, and get horrible sound quality. And you might think, well, it's a $1,000 microphone. Shouldn't it be doing better than this? No, it's not about the microphone itself. It's really about your technique and your environment. The technique, like making sure that you're staying close to the microphone, not several feet away. I tell people typically about a fist width away from it, or about 4 to 6 inches or 10 to 15 centimeters. That's kind of that target zone. And then get good at your technique of pivoting around the microphone. Like if you need to turn and look at a co-host, don't turn away from the microphone, but pivot around the microphone as you are speaking with them, which I just now did.
Right.
And even though I was looking away from the camera, my voice didn't stop being picked up by the microphone because I pivoted around it. And making sure that the microphone is pointing at your mouth from at an angle so you're not, your puffs of air when you say certain words, your plosives aren't going directly into the microphone. That's all technique stuff. And then the environment, thinking about the acoustics of your environment. Like if there's anything you hear while you're recording, your microphone might hear it too. Don't obsess over it, but think about what can you turn off? What can you simply point the microphone away from? What can you do in your space? Like what furniture could you put in, a rug, anything that you could hang up on the walls? I have some acoustic panels that I built for my space with nice LED lights behind them that I can change the colors. They're all controlled by smart speakers and stuff. You don't have to get fancy like that. It could just be a bookshelf filled with books on it. And that's a great looking backdrop too if you want to have video.
Yep.
That kind of stuff. Think of like the F-117 Stealth Fighter. and how it has all of these little angles on it. And it seems like there is no flat surface that's bigger than a hand on it because it's so faceted in order to deflect all of those things. That's the same kind of approach that you can take to audio to ensure that you're not in a flat space. There's lots of either some kind of padding like you get with furniture or multiple angles, so it's deflecting the audio signal. And when you can do those two things, you get your technique good and you get your environment good. Also, like, consider turning off your HVAC system. Suffer for your art a little bit while you're recording. Turn off the dishwasher, put the pets and kids in the other room, or whatever it is that you need to do to make your technique and your environment better. You can get really good results with even a built-in microphone if you just practice those techniques and that good environment. And that's what matters more than the microphone itself.
You'd be shocked. In the previous location before I unfortunately lost my office, not to any fault of my own, I had really invested heavily in making sure that the acoustics were good. I spent a lot of money. And so when I left that location, I was like freaked out because I knew where I was moving to, a loft, a 2,000 square foot loft, which I'm in now, with a 18-foot ceiling, open floor plan, nothing to break it up. The floors are tiled, the absolute possible worst acoustic situation. And what I really did was, it was simple, a little carpet on the floor. I made the backdrop have some acoustic panels. There's enough stuff in front of me that I don't get an echo. And it really, the sound quality, in my opinion, when I compare before and after, is virtually the same. And to me, I was just so worried that the audio quality would go completely sideways, and it hasn't. Now, I used to use a condenser mic. I don't think, when I was in Hawaii using condenser mic, there was two windows that were always open. So if someone started a weed whip or I heard every bird, it made it through to the mic, no problem. And the air conditioner, there was no air conditioner. I sweated through those shows. So now, the only thing that I really had to do here was to control the light, because on each end of the loft, there's a big bay of windows letting in natural light. So today it's 2:00 in the afternoon or so, 1:30 recording this. So I have blackout curtains on the end just to keep the light at the level that I wanted to keep it at. But I think the most important thing you said earlier too, a closet is a great place to record. People are going to feel a little weird to go in a closet and record, but with clothes hanging, oh my God, the best soundproofing you will ever get. Or just maybe a cubby, again, that has something padded and some, like you said, something on the floor. It really does wonders. And controlling that external environment. You're raising a child. I raised my kids, and they were always coming in. The biggest worry was them touching something. So I remember for years I had little plastic covers over everything where they couldn't get their little fingers in to, change the knobs and so forth. But again, if you just have a single microphone on a desk stand and it's got a pad under it and it's not causing a rumble, I think, again, it's about the environment. So I think you're exactly right. And, you don't have to spend a lot of money to do that. It just, sometimes if you're not getting good audio, a spare blanket just for an hour while you're recording in the right location will help tremendously. No one's going to see it. You're going to think it's dumb, or maybe even your spouse or your partner's going to think it's dumb that you put it up. But it's amazing what just a blanket will do for acoustics too.
And even hacking some things together. Like when I first started, you remember back in the day when we used to buy sound cards for our PCs, and they would come with this little stick microphone, like a Laptec brand stick microphone for $10.
Two episodes, that's what I used. Go ahead.
Me too. I think my first 2 episodes as well were recorded with one of those. And the pop filter that I made, because I understood that I needed a pop filter, was a metal hanger and pantyhose on it, which
worked out
for
well.
a single guy to acquire some pantyhose, there's a story there. But that was, doing it rough, and it worked
Yeah,
though. And that's the thing is, as podcasters, we don't have to spend thousands of dollars to make these things work. We can do these things from our closets, basements, whatever space that we have, improvise, put a blanket over your head or whatever, and still get good audio. Now, if you tried to do all of that stuff with video, bringing it back to that
that's right.
conversation, oh, it's so much
It's
harder to make
harder.
sure that you can maintain that quality
Yep.
and look good on top of that.
Yeah, every time I sit down here and I put in my headsets, I'm always praying that there's not some squeal or howl or hum that's been introduced by, ground fault. And, and people will run into that with laptops. Sometimes you plug a USB mic in and you're like, what's that noise? And you unplug the power supply from the laptop and all of a sudden the noise went away. So then you're trying to record your show, making sure that there's enough battery power left in your laptop to get the recording in without that background noise. But anyway, we're getting super geeky here. Let's talk just a little bit. I don't want to go too deep because we could spend 5 hours on this, but what are some of the advice you're giving now on workflow as far as planning and editing? What's some advice you're giving to podcasters these days?
I come from a background of professional speaking, and I highly encourage podcasters learn how to speak so that you don't have to edit so much later.
Don't be like me.
Well, you've practiced though, and you've
Yeah.
rehearsed. And yet, I think all of us have ways that we can continue to improve. So, for some people, that might be enrolling in a public speaking class so that you learn how to speak better in your podcast, because it can be really tricky, especially if you don't have a co host or an audience or someone you're looking at as you're speaking. It can be really hard to communicate that way. It's maybe not as nerve wracking as speaking in front of an audience, but it's still difficult. So learn to communicate better. And if you're starting out, my biggest tips, it's a two-sided coin that might seem contradictory to itself, but two sides to this. When you're starting out, make a list of what you want your podcast to be about. It doesn't have to be a detailed script. You don't even have to hit everything that's on that list, but I recommend writing down a list of 25 of your first episodes or 25 episodes that you want to do. What are those episodes going to be about? What books are you going to review? Movies? What guests are you going to have? What topics? Whatever it is that your show is about. 25 things. Start with a plan, and at the same time, don't wait for things to be perfect. You have to just start. That's, for me, when I first started listening to podcasts in '05, I immediately knew I want to do this as well. But it took me 2 years to start a podcast because I had such a perfectionist mindset. And it took me, even after I started my podcast, I only did 9 episodes in the first 2 years because I was still being a perfectionist. Don't let perfectionism kill you. Just start. It's more important to start and get better than to never start at all. So that's starting out. And like that workflow, as you're recording your podcast, if you want to edit, and I don't fault people for wanting to edit. I have my show edited. I do pay someone to edit my show for me just because I can't afford the time for it now. But if you want to edit, make it easy to edit. Make it so that you know the spots that need to be edited. You could use a marker on your recording device, or some people will clap into the microphone and it makes a nice spike in the audio that's easier to find, or they'll leave some amount of silence. Anything like that that makes it easier for you to easily jump to the spots you know need to be edited, instead of having to look through your entire audio for what can be edited. Because if you're going through looking for things to edit, you will find things to edit, and it might waste your time on trying to remove every single and or slight pause or anything like that. Just go for the main things, especially transitions. Those are good spots. If you're transitioning from one topic to another or from one person to another, that's often where, if there is any kind of wasted time in the response or how you get to that subject, it usually happens in those transitions. But really focus on getting better at communicating so you don't have to edit. And if you decide to take the approach of no editing or very minimal editing, then roll with the mistakes. We, for a little while with our clean comedy podcast that I used to do, I had it edited also. And when we would mess up, then I'd mark that so our editor would know there's a mix up right here. Okay, this is where a spot needs to be edited. And he knew what to look for then to make sure that fixed. But that was for a comedy podcast. And at some point I realized, why are we editing our mistakes? Mistakes can be hilarious. And with our podcast about the TV show Once Upon a Time that we had one time too, same thing, that I realized some of these mistakes, we should just roll with them or even make fun of our mistakes and thus make us not only more personable and relatable, but also entertain the audience more. Like some of the funniest things that happened in our podcast were unplanned things. And our audience loved those things because it was just a spontaneous thing, something that we might have edited out if we wanted to be perfectionists, but because we just ran with it. We knew, hey, any mistake we make, let's try to make something fun out of it. If you mispronounce a word, like there was a time that I mispronounced the word monkeys and I said mungies, and that became a joke on our show. Let's let the mungies out of the barrel. And you get that kind of fun stuff, that camaraderie with your audience, those relationships when they see you being personable and just human like that.
I think there's some great points there. And I've always said the beauty about doing audio is you can fix and post.
Yes.
If you make a mistake, put that clap in there or whatever it is. And that's actually a great tip right off the top. But when you're doing video, what I found and what I've told people about video is it makes you a better podcaster because it's really hard to fix. And if you're live, if you're streaming live, then it's even more hard to figure out how to back out of this. And you just go, well, that mistake's going to stay, and you live with it. If you're doing audio podcasts, you can fix it in audio, but the video just kind of lives on, or else it just kind of, you'll end up looking like you're, a walking head when you're doing editing. So some good points there. But I think video makes you prepare more. Audio gives the allowance of allowing to be able to edit when there's an issue. I got 2 topics left for us. A lot of AI stuff in the world right now. And, a lot of people are thinking about ideas on AI. I think there's a balancing that we have to look at here. How do we maintain our authentic voices in this AI-driven world that we're heavily getting into?
I think the easiest thing is never let the AI create the content for you. You create the content and you can use AI to then refine it. You could even use the AI to help you improve some of the content or to inspire or even just give you some momentum for creating the content. But I really think that you as the podcaster need to be the one making the actual content, writing the actual script, not letting the AI do that. Because then that is truly letting the person out, but then using AI for what it's really best at is working with content that we give it, not asking it to give us the content.
I think there's going to be a reckoning here soon where people are going to be seeking out original voices, content with emotion, content. Because I've run into it all the time already on YouTube. You get a YouTube video and it's just AI generated audio, and I immediately back out of those because it's not authentic. It's not a person that I know or I can trust that's speaking to me. It's something that's been auto-generated. There is some great tools out there now. I know that you love Audacity. I love Adobe Audition. I've used it for many, many years, but there's tools like Descript. Matter of fact, Blubrry just made a partnership with Adobe Podcast to get our podcasters 60 days free trial on Adobe Podcast. Where you fit in all this? Have you used Descript or any of these other tools?
Yeah, I've tried them for some of their different uses. And I love that it's giving a new approach to editing audio or even video. Like when Descript came onto the scene, and yes, there were some others around the same time, but Descript is the one that has survived. To make it as simple as selecting text and cutting, copying, pasting, any of that. That is beautiful. I love it when we can make the technology disappear for the content creators.
That's the key.
Making it easier for them. I think that there are certain cautions that come with that where you have to really go back and listen or watch what you've created to see, does this still have the right flow? Does it look like I said this thing right when I did, or does it look like you're saying you're popping around on the screen, or it seems like the lighting is all completely different, your voice sounds completely different where you paste it in, and all of that kind of thing. And yeah, some AI tools are trying to improve some of those transitions, but I'm a big fan of what we can do to make it easier for the creators, easier for the consumers as well. Because when the technology disappears, that's when we see influxes. Like, as much as we hate on Anchor for the
Yeah.
pollution that they added to the podcasting space, what Anchor did beautifully, though, is they did make it so incredibly easy
Mm-hmm.
to launch a podcast. In fact, almost too easy, because that's why we got so many single episode, I
Test,
call them
test,
pod
test.
flashes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of stuff just polluting Apple Podcasts and Spotify and other places was because they made it that easy. I don't like that the pollution happened from that, but I do love that they made it easy. So anything that makes it easier for the content creators and the consumers, I'm a big fan of.
I can listen to certain podcasts that I know use Descript. Um, there, I think moderation in editing in Descript needs to be emphasized.
Yes.
Because sometimes you're like, whoa, that's really compressed. You can just tell they've tried to ink every microsecond out of the show to shrink it. And
Yes.
it's not even like the person breathes or the transition is just so fast. There is room for dramatic pauses. Okay. There is room, and it's part of that experience, because if I said there's room for dramatic pauses, it's not the same effect as saying there's room for dramatic pauses in content. Because there's a study that just came out, believe it or not, this is going to blow your mind, that we process at a 10-bit rate in our brains when we're thinking. Now, visual, we're taking it at 100 times that amount. But when we're thinking and processing stuff, we're working at a 10-bit mode, which blows me away from a geek standpoint. But it really does show the importance of, in order to allow people to continue to concentrate on your content that you're producing, is to be able to give that content at a steady state that allows them to think. And I think that's a big, big part of what some of these tools make a mistake in. And if you're listening at 1.5 or 2 times speed, you may need a prescription at some point, because to me, when I listen to those types of, if I listen at those speeds, it makes me almost manic. And it's almost like I can't calm down. It takes my brain into a different state. So don't listen at 1.5 or 2. So last question for you, and this is a good one. What's ahead? What's the future of podcasting as we see it here in the beginning of 2025?
I love talking about this. It's why I co-host the show, The Future of Podcasting, with Dave Jackson. And I did that keynote several years ago, and it's neat to see some of those predictions coming true. I think there's plenty of more to see. We're going to see more podcasters, more podcasts, more people listening to podcasts, more podcast apps, platforms. Add more to anything that's happening right now. I think we'll see that. What I'm more excited to see are some of the innovations, especially like what we're doing in Podcasting 2.0, bringing new capabilities to the podcasting industry, things that couldn't be done before, but that will soon be able to be done in the apps. Like, think about transcripts. That the only way that we delivered transcripts years ago was a link on a website, and it was often like a PDF download, which that has all kinds of accessibility issues there. But now, attaching the transcript through the RSS feed, through the Podcasting 2.0 spec, that kind of thing not only makes it more accessible for the hearing impaired, but also offers all kinds of other things, like helps with search. It could help with the retention of the information. Like, I love on Apple TV Plus, when you're watching a show, if you have to go back 30 seconds, it automatically turns on the closed captioning, because they, I think, reasonably assume that you're going back a few seconds because you're wondering, wait, what did they say? And so it turns on that closed captioning. We could do that now in podcasts thanks to the transcript. But I'm more excited about ways that the podcasters will be able to engage with their audience through support, through messaging, through cross-app comments, through some of those things that really turn a casual audience into a super loyal community. That's the stuff I'm most excited about. Cross-app comments, boostergrams, streaming payments, anything, whatever terms we eventually come up with in the technologies that make those things possible. Because this goes back to the roots of what I think made podcasting so great in the beginning, and what helped it catch on is that people felt like they knew the hosts. And like you say often, Ohana, we've got our family, and we're making a family with our community and helping them to connect with each other. So I'm excited to see new ways that we will be able to do that.
We're going to have a special guest on at some point here in the near future that's going to talk in depth about podcasting 2.0. And it's really well unknown by many podcasters.
Yeah.
What is really possible. And all we really have to do is have continued cooperation by education, more adoption. The sky is really unlimited in that regard. And really, if we want audio podcasts and video podcasting to thrive and regain or even show some of the magic that we know exist in this space, I think those particular 30 plus new features, that's what I'm going to call the podcasting 2.0 stuff, 30 new features for audiences majority, it could completely make the difference between audio kind of just like maybe continuing on in its current state or being able to excel and have a much more engaging, much more engaging. And you going back to talking about community, there is nothing that makes a podcast creator more excited is by getting some sort of feedback by email, via if you have a voicemail line, or if they send you a text, or in podcasting 2.0 they send you a boost. That almost will carry you multiple episodes and being motivated, knowing that someone's listening, someone's reacting, and someone's getting back to you. We're short on time. Daniel, how can they reach you? Where can they find you? What's the 411 on all that?
I'm on most social networks as the Daniel J. Lewis, and we were just talking about engagement. And if you want to engage your audience and grow your podcast, check out the tools that I provide at podgagement.com.
So what's the email? What's the best email to reach out if they want to do that too? Is there one?
Feedback at the Audacity to podcast.com if you want to reach me, or pretty much just add a feedback at or Daniel at in front of any of my domains, and that might also come to me.
We'll have all that information in the show notes. It'll be in the video post. It'll be in the audio post as well. So you can definitely look there as well and grab that information. Daniel, thanks for being with me today. I was looking forward to this interview. We could talk for another 2 hours, my friend. There would be no problem continuing. And much success to Pod Engagement and what you're doing over there. And I know we're just both coming off a big event, and hopefully you see good growth with new customers that are starting to utilize the platform.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you for your leadership in this space too.
Yeah, thank you too. All right, everyone. That's it for Podcast Insider Special Edition for this route. Stay engaged, stay subscribed, and follow us wherever you listen to your audio or video podcasts.